You're listening to the European Parliamentary Research Service podcast on environmental protection.
EU efforts to improve our environment and thus our quality of life are bearing fruit. Today we enjoy cleaner air and water than we did some decades ago. But the outlook for the European environment 20 years from now shows a bleak picture.
That's why the European Union is pushing not only for stronger action, but also for more money to ensure that by 2050 we are living well within the limits of our planet. Want to know more? Stay with us.
The European Union has actually been protecting the environment since the early 1970s, since it understood that a healthy environment is a precondition for a healthy and prosperous economy and society.
Since then, it has legislated on a wide range of areas from air and water to chemicals, waste, climate and nature, and since 2014 it has redoubled its efforts on a number of areas. Let's give you a few examples.
On air quality, for instance, the EU adopted new rules in 2016, setting maximum amounts of 5 key air pollutants that countries can emit into the atmosphere. The aim is to halve the number of premature deaths linked to air pollution by 2030.
To help fight climate change, EU legislation limits greenhouse gas emissions from factories and power plants under the emissions trading scheme, as well as emissions from other sectors such as agriculture and road transport.
But transport remains a big source of greenhouse gas. So to decarbonise the sector, the Commission presented a European strategy for low-emission mobility in 2016.
Parliament and Council have also passed new laws tightening EU waste rules, for example, introducing new recycling targets and limiting the use of plastic bags. And they're currently discussing measures to tackle marine litter, in particular due to waste plastics. Furthermore, the European Parliament has been pushing for ambitious climate policies.
Yes, it has. Parliament and Council have also been encouraging the transition to a circular economy and a consumption model based on the 5 Rs: reduce, reuse, refurbish, repair and recycle.
Whether all these efforts will help the EU achieve its ambitious climate and sustainability targets is something we can't yet predict. However, previous efforts have undoubtedly paid off.
Today, the EU has a network of Natura 2000 protected areas covering almost a fifth of its territory, and we've observed a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and higher levels of recycling.
Europeans today can also enjoy cleaner air and water, but don't uncork the champagne just yet. Although we've made progress in these areas, the truth is that the outlook 20 years from now shows a bleak picture. Want to know why? Stay with us.
According to the European Environment Agency, there are a number of challenges. As regards natural capital, 60% of protected species and 77% of habitats assessed are at risk, and we're still far from meeting the 2020 target of halting biodiversity loss.
Furthermore, 60% of Europe's rivers and lakes are not in good ecological state, and climate change is only expected to make things worse. Regarding the circular and low-carbon economy, current policies will not suffice to help Europe achieve its long-term environmental goals, such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 80% to 95% by 2050.
On citizens' health and well-being, the expected improvements in air quality will not prevent continuing harm, and more Europeans are expected to suffer from climate change-related impacts. So to deal with these challenges, the EU will certainly need to move up a gear.
But let's look at it from a positive perspective. Transitioning to sustainability could deliver a number of benefits beyond environmental protection, from jobs and economic activity to well-being and health.
With over 4 million people employed in the environmental goods and services sector, it is estimated that the transition to a circular economy could increase GDP by 1 to 7 percentage points by 2030.
Stronger ecosystems, cleaner air and water, and less chemicals in consumer products would also improve the general health of Europe's citizens.
And citizens want more environmental protection. According to a recent poll conducted for the European Parliament, the support of EU citizens for even stronger EU involvement in environmental protection grew from 2/3 in 2016 to 3/4 in 2018, although people in Central and Eastern European countries are less supportive of this than those in Western European countries.
So how much money is the EU currently putting into environmental protection? Let's have a look.
In the current financial framework, which runs until 2020, at least 20% of the EU budget must be spent on climate action objectives. As a result, climate goals have been integrated in all major EU policies and programmes, including cohesion, agriculture, maritime and fisheries, external aid, energy and transport, and research and innovation.
Climate action is delivered through programmes and funds such as the European Structural and Investment Funds, the European Fund for Strategic Investments, the Agriculture Fund for Rural Development, the LIFE programme Horizon 2020, and many other EU external action and humanitarian aid initiatives.
These are implemented by the Commission together with the Member States and in cooperation with organisations in third countries.
Now, looking at the longer term, EU environment and climate spending is expected to increase in the future. For the next budgetary framework, which will run from 2021 to 2027, the Commission has proposed to boost the share of EU spending contributing to climate objectives from 20% to 25%, and it wants to beef up the financial envelope for the LIFE programme by 50%.
The European Parliament wants to go even further and has called for climate-related spending to reach 30% of the EU budget and to double the money allocated to the LIFE programme.
Now, where will all this money be invested?
Well, in the coming years, EU policies are expected to focus on climate action to achieve the 2050 goal of cutting greenhouse gas emissions by 80% compared to 1990 levels, protecting nature and biodiversity, improving air quality, accelerating the transition to the circular economy, and promoting low-risk pesticides.
Because in the end, it's not only the planet, but our health, our well-being, and our own lives which are at stake.
You're listening to the European Parliamentary Research Service podcasts.